Welcome everyone, welcome to Learning Technologies, welcome to this session. My name is Lars Hyland, I work with Totara Learning. We're an open source learning management system and social learning platform company. And today I'm going to talk about blends and looking at how we can develop more effective blends and the relationship that has between perhaps the more dominant, more traditional formal training and learning that we do in many of our organizations, and the growing relevance and need to support informal learning in the workplace. And this topic of the session really is to focus on what the platforms that you may have or what they're considering can do to support those well. So just a very brief introduction to us at Totara. We have two key products, which is Totara LMS and Totara Social, and they come together to form a full spectrum to deliver formal and informal learning. And the nature of my talk is to really suggest that having social learning or informal learning in isolation is something that it still needs structure, it still needs some support around that to manage and report on and to be able to steer people in the right sort of directions. So essentially, by bringing these two products together, which are specialists in their areas, they can deliver a very rich blended learning experience, and to start to work towards the ideal where we are embedding learning into workflow that's very contextual, it's right time, it's right place, and we're able to prompt people to reach the competence levels and also access learning opportunities really at the maximum time it has of it to give them maximum impact on them as individuals. We do this through an innovation network. We have over 80 partners around the world that can support individual solution designs with our products. It means that we can innovate quickly, agilely, and reach a very wide audience. And deliver I think a richer sort of solution set for you in any of your organizations that you have. And that currently stands at around 800 organizations around the world with 7 million users, 35 countries and in 22 languages. So fairly broad support here for any organization of certainly significant size, multinational size, but equally small organizations that are growing rapidly and with a need to be dynamic and agile in their own right. Range of organizations that we work with, some good range of brands, and I'll show you a couple of examples a little later on. But essentially, we're here to offer freedom so that rather than being locked into a particular platform, you're able to focus on your business requirements and be able to ensure that the service you're getting from your partners supporting the platforms that you have in place, they're effective and working with you, and yet you can still have full control over the platform and the design and the solutions and your data. The range of applications that the platforms use and the range that blended, when you're coming to blended design, you need to have a platform that's flexible. So there's a whole range of different types of situations and contexts in which you may be wanting to deliver learning solutions. And we've got plenty of examples of how that operates, which you can explore later around the hall here. We have 8 different partners who are offering Totara solutions here. So blended learning design. What is it? Well, there's a definition is that it's a learning intervention that combines a number of methods and media. So that could be a whole range of different things. But the key sort of 4 strategic elements I think that are worth thinking about, or facets, are the delivery channel, clearly. So in many cases we're still very focused on the face-to-face type of traditional classroom type delivery. In fact, something not akin, dissimilar to what we're doing now. But also online activities, or whether they're delivered in your own time at your own pace, i.e. the social context, which is another key facet. Is it one-to-one? Is it group? Is it community? The communications mode itself, are we doing it at the same time together? Are we doing it in our own time and being able to communicate asynchronously? And clearly all of that needs to be brought together by understanding the learning strategy that's going to guide the learning experience that you're trying to build with a blend. And that will be very much guided by the nature of the material or the behaviours and the skills that you're looking to develop. So is it instruction-led, or are you looking to guide discovery through materials, or is it actually more free exploration, which is much more sort of action learning oriented, which all of these things are relevant, all of these things matter to effective learning outcomes, not one in isolation. Various learning theories and models are out there. No doubt these are very familiar to you. And when it comes to thinking about a blend, it's probably not appropriate to be too hung up on any one individual one. What's better is to look at these things as a kit bag and to be able to draw on those elements as the situation requires. So think very carefully about the people that you're serving. Who are they? Where are they? What are their existing skill sets that they need to master? What are you looking to develop in them? And think about the context in which they're going to have to perform those new skills and development and needs. That's really crucial. The move towards 70-20-10 is a model which exemplifies, I think, a lot of the thinking around a shift towards an effective blend. This obviously emphasises, as you can see, sort of on-the-job experience as one of the primary areas in which real sort of learning change happens, and that's well observed. And then we've got 20% around informal learning opportunities, which are slightly more structured, and then with the formal learning. And this is sort of a reversal of the way in which most of our training budgets are still sort of geared, tends to focus more on the formal side. However, a lot of this isn't just about just letting go and letting people learn on the job, in and around their own time. It needs some structure, it needs some guidance, and without that, there's a danger that things can drift and you don't actually achieve the sort of performance improvements that you're looking for, the desired ones. So there's a framework, a structure that needs to be sitting around that. So when it comes to designing a blend, and a well-designed, rich blended solution is one that does provide that proper balance between formal guidance and informal opportunities to explore and embed and practice what you're learning. And it's that balance between the technology that drives that, so the platforms that you use, the other types of tools, authoring tools, other media and channel type tools that you can use, learning technologies that can really make this more efficient and ultimately more effective. And also the sort of people interactions that we have. So when we're talking about social learning, it's about people talking to people, either mediated through technology or face-to-face. But how do we draw out the learning opportunities from that? How do we recognise them, and how do we then subsequently record achievement and those observations? And when it comes to the learning experiences that we design, are they intended? Can they be successfully achieved through independent learning, or is it actually much more about teams working together? And as we see in organisations, it's very much around teams working together and having the right type of social tools to support that group learning is quite key. So, does blended learning work? Well, there's been various attempts to sort of research this over time, and it's still ongoing. There's an interesting paper that has looked at a meta-analysis of empirical literature over time, just a couple of years ago. But essentially, there is growing evidence that a well-designed blended solution does outperform any, say, online instruction on its own, which equally outperforms face-to-face on its own. So it's quite a dramatic statement, but it's one that does bear some scrutiny, and as time goes by, we're seeing more and more evidence that as blended designs themselves become more rich and more sophisticated, that this bears out quite well. In recent sort of surveys and studies, we're seeing organisations increasingly using blended designs. In one survey here, we've captured 80% of organisations are doing it. But to what extent? Is it a relatively straightforward, simple blend, i.e. a bit of e-learning and and a classroom session, or even just reducing a classroom session and giving people paperwork to read as pre-reading. I mean, that counts as an extremely simple sort of blended opportunity. And as it says, as I've recognised here, that classroom and e-learning together is pretty much the frequent blend. But we need to be a bit more sophisticated than that to achieve a long-term learning outcome with true learning transfer and retention and shifts in behaviour if we're going to be truly effective in this. So that means introducing other types of tools, webinars, social learning, on-the-job training, coaching opportunities, peers and also experts. Being able to use things in a mobile goes without saying these days, but also thinking about the size and shape of the resources that you're making up your blend is quite key. So how does this sort of split out? So blending in the workplace, if you take it as a spectrum here of formal and informal, clearly informal settings, typically you've got a classroom, you have formal sort of activities and assessment, structured interactive online modules that people would be completing. On the informal side, on the other extreme, you've got sort of mentoring opportunities, coaching, networking people together so that they're working in action learning groups, using a tool, an online tool or existing communication tools in the organisation, and best practice forums inside and outside of the organisation. But being able to bring those two things together so that you've got some formal structure that guides informal actions and vice versa. Informal activity starts to direct people to the right formal interventions that they need, gives us, I think, a much more personalised, contextualised set of outcomes. And it allows us to situate that learning or that blended experience very much more closely to work, i.e. everyday work practice, rather than perhaps people still hold a perception that training is done in the abstract. So I stop work and then I go and train and then I come back. And even if you design an interesting interactive blend of activities, if it's still contextualized in an abstract sense, there's a danger that you won't get that learning transfer coming through. So when we think about work-based blending, what does that entail? Well, work-based activities they are completed as part of a blended course. So it's thinking about prompting people to understand the new skills or behaviours that they're looking to do or to acquire, giving people opportunities to practice, both virtually perhaps or in a simulated sort of environment, and then being able to then practice it for real with groups, perhaps in a more controlled setting, solving real problems. By putting it in the workplace, though, it allows us to focus on perhaps real workplace problems. So we get double effect. So we're actually making a real difference in the workplace, but equally we're building up our skill, our experience, and our expertise in those areas. We can include workplace supervision and coaching. And how do we sort of pull all those elements together? We need, I think, some tools to enable us to do that, to record and observe those interactions happening, and then being able to assess achievement and observe that people are operating at the competence levels that we want to achieve. So clearly, where this facilitation and mediation exists, it needs to operate in an instructor level. There's a supervisor level, i.e. in the team or the management of individuals learning, plus also your wider sort of network of experienced peers. So in terms of designing a blend, doing it in isolation is quite challenging. There are lots of options. How do you settle on the right optimum mix and blend of that? And so I'm just going to offer up a structure that hopefully gives you some ideas as to how you can think more carefully about the blend and the designs that you would be wanting to produce. So there's a number of dimensions here I've sort of set up. Essentially, if you look at that axis, we've got an axis that moves from a system or sort of automated experience through to something that's much more human. Where does the experience, if you like, touch the individual learner, as it were. If we go towards the human scale, then you can see if you also set that against costs, low and high, which are critical consideration constraint when we're designing learning solutions. More high costs, we end up in that top box here with mentoring it, instructor-led classrooms, workshops, and live e-learning. Tend to be expensive because they tend to be bringing people together. They're time intensive, both in terms of expertise and expensive in terms of diverted time on expertise. Being able to capture that in an automated way, in sophisticated ways, such as with simulations, online learning, scenario build tools that you build, and performance support tools, there's some expense there clearly in building them, but then they become highly efficient in being able to reach many, many people. So it's balancing that investment. And then on the other flip side, where things are low and fairly low cost, but still, have their roles clearly, workbooks, online knowledge databases, media production, increasingly is not that expensive to produce. The skills to do it well are fairly scarce, and access to online resources, which are clearly very easy to do in our pocket at any time with our mobile devices. So just breaking out the various options that you have in a blend in this way starts to give you some framework around making the right decisions as to which type of media works best to deliver that blended experience. Another way of looking at it as well is in terms of the learning itself. Is it really core to the job? So in terms of is there a health and safety issue? Is it mandatory? Is it regulatory? Does it need to be instructed? There are things that aren't really about sort of ambient learning or sort of self-driven learning, because frankly they're not interesting enough to do. They're things that you have to do in your job, and they're mandated and in organisations. So there needs to be a formal way of exposing people to that, and then a formal way of assessing that has come across. That does need to be balanced against ensuring that the behaviours shift as well. So it's all very well assessing people, but if they don't actually change their behaviours, then that's a fairly pointless exercise. The other dimension against that is looking at independent learning versus social learning, and again that helps us start to identify the right mix of or the right learning or blended activities that would be most appropriate for a particular learning need. And then another dimension here is about the stability and the volatility, should we say, of the learning opportunity. A lot of learning has to happen in a very short period of time, increasingly short periods of time, whether that be product launches. The typical life cycle of a product launch now is shrinking, 6 months, maybe 3 months. People need to know what those new products are about. People need to know about new processes that are being evolved. Businesses are changing their shapes very rapidly in response to business conditions. So your learning solutions have to be just as agile, and they need to be designed in such a way that allow you to deliver up-to-date, accurate experiences that will change, that will be in time to make a difference. If we're building things that are too complex or take too long to build, then you'll miss your moment and waste time and money and cost. So this is another way of looking at it. Again, another axis about how long does it take to build these things, through to if it's fairly short, how volatile. That will help identify the right types or your palette, if you like, of blended activity opportunities. Now, those three things together, if you were to use that as a tool, it's a loose tool, to hopefully that gives some guidance as to how to choose the right things in the right places. There'll be other factors clearly about your budget, overall time that you have, the nature of your organisation, the framework that you have, but that hopefully gives some structure to that to give you some direction in making those blends more effective. Now, when it comes to the social learning side of things, clearly there are plenty of tools out there that could be used to support social learning. A lot of them tend to centre on areas that are fairly unstructured. Where we tend to focus is in trying to provide what we call a scaffolded learning experience. So a tool set that allows you to work closely with a more formal environment like a learning management system, they'll be able to use the strengths of both to deliver deeper integration between the tracking and the reporting and tracking of that activity. So social interaction or work-based social interaction, that those actions can accumulate to a knowledge level or a demonstration of expertise that can then be recognised formally in the LMS, for example. So this is, I think, just an important sort of point to make, that thinking about structure around the social learning isn't about controlling it. It's actually about observing and identifying where the value is being derived from there. So that brings us back to Totara and the solutions that we offer. We feel that we have a platform and structure set that will enable that more rich approach to blend. It gives you the opportunities without constraints. So, in summary, when it comes to designing blends, think carefully about the barriers that you might be facing in the organisation, whether they be management support through to cost and availability of tools and technology infrastructure that you may have. That will also clearly, as that framework that I presented to you alludes to, will help you structure the blend accordingly. I think a key thing I'd like to recommend is that you do focus on how you see that learning transfer operating and working, and that you do that more in terms of embedding activities into real work contexts, and then leveraging your tools and platforms accordingly. Encouraging sharing and collaboration, I think, is always been critical. It's just now needs to be more visible, and us as learning practitioners need to be able to find ways to observe it in the right ways, to support it, to develop it in positive ways, and to direct it in the direction that is good for the organisation and for the individual's development as well. A critical point here, and I think it's said many times, is getting managerial support in these learning interventions is critical. And when it comes to designing a blend, including your managers in that process and being part of that blend, if you like, is very critical to long-term success. So being able to secure their time commitment. And one of the good things is that managers will be much more amenable to learning designs that are situated in real work contexts than they are in terms of things that are much more abstract from the work environment. And then finally, with a blend, you can very much, I think, start to personalize through the context. It naturally brings forward that any individual learning experience starts to, with the social elements, starts to direct you to particular learning opportunities and support that any one individual person needs to have access. So a better way of saying it is that you're not designing a blend that everyone gets in exactly the same way. You're giving people opportunities to explore and to support them in richer ways. So there are alternatives that people can experience. You can shorten the blended, the overall experience for those who have demonstrated competence or experience earlier. Those who need more support, the blend can adapt accordingly. And the platforms that you use should be able to support you in that design. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, I'd recommend morethanblended.com. That's it's an independent sort of site. There's a book you can get as well that's very much focused on blended design practice, headed up by Clive Shepherd, who's a long-standing sort of expert in this field. And so I'd recommend that. We also have on our website a series of 4 guides on social learning best practice, which are free. You can download those, so please step onto the website and take those away. And just a quick sort of look at, if you want to learn more about some real solutions that are here today, there are a number of stands that you can go to and see this in action. So just to highlight a few recent award winners from our partner group. We have an excellent Totara project with Juries In, Learning Pool, produced. They're on stand C21, so do note that down and go and have a chat to them, because they'll be able to give you good guidance in that area. We also have Kineo, City and Guilds Kineo. They have an excellent solution with Samsung, which is for product knowledge. It's called Backstage. They'll be demonstrating that. I think there's another talk actually around that solution set as well later, which I'd recommend you go see if you're interested. And likewise, Thorwell, we have Sky, who are a Totara organisation, and they work with another partner of ours, MindClick. They're on stand B17A13, and I recommend you have a chat to all three of those if you have time. You will be able to find them all here. In fact, there's not just three; we have 8 partners around the show. So please do go talk to them. They're very skilled and expert in providing solutions, blended ones in particular, using our tool sets, both Totara LMS and Totara Social. There's a couple of other seminars here which deep dive into LMS, and also a particular use case here with GLH hotels. So I'd recommend you perhaps go along to those theatres a bit later on. That's it. That's me done. If you have any questions, do let me know. I'm here to talk to. If you'd like to learn more about Totara, then you can learn more on our website. And we have our team at the back here who would be happy to take cards or any other information that you'd like to provide. So thank you very much for your attention.